Hello,
Hi.
we're here in my back bedroom in a homemade recording studio. My name's Denise Erickson, and with Esther Coleman Hawkins, I'm co-founder of Media Mentors Australia with a mission to help creatives create.
And we're doing that by running a series of micro-skill workshops with industry experts.
And with the help of ACMI, who, with their amazing support, here we are on the ACMI YouTube channel.
Join the conversation, #RunningFreeSkills.
And we're going to be doing these as a bit of a tag team. You're first up. I'm out of here. See ya. Good luck.
Today we're talking about life as a freelancer, particularly finding new markets in these tough times. Joining me is author and journalist Jenny Valentish. She is a freelancer from way back. She's been a music PR and Lads Mag editor. She's written books and she's now an addiction expert. We're going to be talking about adaptability, about pitching, and about rejection, because it is part of freelance life. Welcome, Jenny.
Hello.
Jenny, throughout your career, you have diversified. You've been a music PR, you've written for a Lads Mag, you've edited a music mag, you've been music journalist, you've written a fiction novel, you've written a scientific novel or a scientific book, and you're now kind of an expert in addiction science. So tell me about how that happened. Tell me about adaptability for you.
Well, I got into it in a pretty non-conventional route. So I got into journalism when I was about 18, and I was doing a fanzine in England. You know, it would be a blog now, but basically you cut and paste, print stick jobby that you do in your bedroom. And that actually got me a fair bit of notoriety, let's say. And from there I started sort of early freelancing, doing columns and things like that as the cheeky young upstart. And from there moved into staff jobs, like, you know, sub-editing and that kind of thing. And when I moved to Australia, I edited, well, first of all, I was a sub-editor for Ralph magazine. That's the Lads Mag that you mentioned. Lads Mag, very British expression, I think. And then I edited first of all, I edited Triple J's magazine, J Mag, for 4 years, which was, you know, a dream job pretty much. And then Time Out Melbourne, another dream job. But things started changing. Things became a lot more difficult for actual people working on staff and editors, because budgets were going down, and there'd be much more of a push onto doing things like traffic reports constantly and moving online more, and how can we branch out into other ventures that aren't really to do with publishing as such. So it was at that point I decided to jump ship and go freelance, and I've done that for 5 years. So you're right, you do have to be very adaptable. You have to not take it for granted that your regular gig's going to stay there. And as we know, people are laid off all the time, for instance, which means there's another kind of influx of journalists out into the freelancing world. So it's about sort of staying nimble and not being complacent.
Excellent. And I also wanted to mention that lots of us, me totally included, were brought up with the notion that the right kind of job was a job for life. And long before viruses came along, this notion was becoming really outdated and not applicable or helpful to most of us. And if you're worried, if you still got that old belief that you should have a job where you turn up at 9 o'clock to the office and you work there till 5 and then you go home, it's probably time to let that go. That kind of job, unless you want to go and work as, you know, you want to go and work for the government, probably that job doesn't exist, and it's okay. We're all going to be okay. So let's start with the positives of being a freelancer. Jenny, what's the best thing about being a freelancer for you?
It's definitely the fact that any ridiculous idea that pops into my mind, if I work on it hard enough and find the right angle, I'm hopefully going to find someone to take it. So it's this freedom, basically. Freedom's probably, to me, the most valuable thing you can possibly have. And once you've come up with these ideas, of course, then you get this privilege of delving into people's lives, really in a very impertinent way. And they just let you, in interview mode, they'll let you come along, complete stranger, delve into the deep and meaningful, like a SWAT team, and then pull out, never see them again. So it's a really odd, privileged thing to be doing. And I know if you work in TV, for instance, you'll experience that too. And I just love that. So I think for me, it's being granted that access to people's innermost lives.
One thing that I really like that you said is that you get to follow any crazy idea you have. And if you work hard and find the right angle, somebody will take it. And I love that, because that reminds us that all creativity, all new ideas, all new business ideas, all new books, films, TV shows, online, everything new requires somebody to go, oh, I've got this great idea, I'm going to follow it. Even though other people will be naysayers, negative Noras, and will tell you it's not possible or not interesting, it is about putting the work in when you've got a really good idea and you really believe in it.
And when you've got a good idea, I mean, one of the kind of drawbacks of our job, I think, is that you end up throwing a ton of mud at the wall, waiting for something to stick. Whether it be trying to write a book or trying to write a story, pitch a story, you're going to come up with a load of crap most of the time, and you keep playing with the crap, metaphors, and seeing if you can work with it in different ways, and eventually go, no, that's just not going to work at all, and you have to work with something else. So a good amount of my time is wasted on trying to find this great idea, but once you do have it, you definitely know, and it clicks.
I heard this great story about a woman who in the mid-90s wrote a musical about menopausal women. And it didn't go anywhere. She battled with it for 25 years, and then it suddenly found a huge audience. Like, I love that dedication to an idea. It really warms my heart.
Yeah.
And, I think the other thing to remember about creativity and freelancing and new ideas is that you've got to be willing to change that idea to fit the marketplace. And do you have an example of when you've had an idea that you've had to alter slightly to fit to kind of get it away, to get it to work?
I don't have a specific example in mind, but I mean, there's one title in particular that I keep pitching things at, because I think this is so perfect for you. And without fail, every single thing so far has been rejected, even though they've got all these different sections on their site. But every single thing that I pitched and they rejected, I've immediately managed to sell somewhere else. So it's just a question of persistence and giving each editor a time frame and then moving it along, but making sure that you adapt it for each editor and adapt it for each title, because it's not going to be one size fits all, your idea.
And the other point to think about is, just because you're working in one medium or one job now doesn't mean that it can't change, that you can't learn new skills, that you can't adapt what you know. So whether you're a set builder or a sound recordist, you've got the basis to kind of move on with your career. It is genuinely never too late to learn a new skill. And I love this word. It's a friend of mine who is a tech startup person. She uses this word all the time, pivot. And pivot sounds like a really positive, exciting thing. What it means is we tried something, it didn't work, so we're going to do something else. And yet so many of us carry this sense of shame that if we don't get it right, it's terrible and we're terrible and we should forget the idea. In the tech world, they're like, yeah, that didn't work. We'll pivot and throw another $250,000 at this new idea. And I think we need to embrace, maybe not the $250,000, sadly, but we certainly need to embrace that spirit.
Yeah, in business, in the business world in general, the idea of failure has always been one that it's a learning process, and this is really interesting.
So, right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what you need to do to find new markets and sell content. So, Jenny, what do editors and content distributors actually want?
What they want is something that they can't do in-house, basically. So you've got to be pitching something that they couldn't just say, no, we were going to do that already last week, and we're going to send our staff writer to do that, or staff whoever. So it means that you've really got to think about what makes your knowledge unique. What kind of contacts do you have that they're not going to have? What kind of stories do you have access to that they're not going to have? What's your knowledge base like? So, for instance, I took advantage of the fact that I'd spent a good 20 years in active addiction by writing a book about that, but also tons of articles about that, and making that my niche, if you like. And so if you've been working on anything like, for instance, if I'm working on a book, I'm always going to be looking at the material that I've got, my research material, and looking at, okay, what's going to go in the book or whatever your project is, and what have I got left over? Like, what else did interviewees tell me that I can't use? What research have I done that took me off onto a tangent? Oh, that's really interesting. So you need to be plundering those things, things that really interest you, and then making sure that it's accessible for a wider audience.
Excellent. And what about, so that brings me quite neatly onto this notion. It's like an old school journalism notion. They used to call it doing rounds. And what that means is just staying in touch with your contacts and saying, oh, what have you got going on? Anything new in your store, anything new happening? Have you, because I presume writing your book about addiction, you must have built up a huge resource of scientific contacts. Have you got work subsequently by selling other stories about them?
Absolutely. So one person in particular who I'd interviewed quite a few times about addiction issues, he then became probably one of the country's leading experts on psychedelic research. So, in the past couple of years, we've had, in the past year, we've had trials starting. We've had a psilocybin trial, we've got an MDMA trial starting, and this guy's been at the forefront of it. So he's been fantastic. I must have interviewed him probably about 10 times now. For different stories about the new kind of psychedelic frontier, whereas before I used to interview him pretty much exclusively about addiction.
Brilliant. And that applies not just to people that you think you might be able to, in the general sense, get a story out of, but it's also important to stay, as a freelancer, to stay in touch with all the people that you've worked with, because so many jobs in the freelance world go to whoever you can remember recently as having been in touch with this particular skill. So many jobs are about being in the right place at the right time. And the way you get in the right place at the right time is you have to put yourself there. You have to actually drop them an email, not in a kind of stalkery, I want work kind of way, but just, hey, how are you? Just checking to see what's going on. I'm doing this, or I've learnt this recently. You're just updating them. You're staying in contact. Now, once I've gone back to my expert. They've got a great story. How do I pitch? Tell me. We're only going to very briefly touch on pitching, because frankly, pitching, Jenny, you could do us like a whole day's workshop about pitching. But let's just give us a quick dot point things about pitching.
Yeah. So I would. This is how I would lay out a pitch. Okay. First sentence. I'm Jenny Valentish. I write for blah, blah, blah. Make sure their titles or whatever it is you're pitching, make sure these things that you're name dropping are vaguely relevant to what they do. And then you could maybe just link to some work as you're naming these people. I would then say, this is for your X section, or in some other way demonstrate that this is specifically for this area of what they do. So it demonstrates that you actually are familiar with what they do. That's really, really, really important, because if they think you're pitching a one-size-fits-all idea, as I mentioned earlier, it's probably going to turn them off. Then I would sort of open with your idea in a very grabby way, just as when you're writing an article, you would start the article in a grabby way. You want to hook them. I would name who you're going to be talking to if you're doing that. And most editors would want a couple of people. They might want an opposing voice for balance. So you would suggest these kind of people. Does it need an expert voice? If so, have one ready to go. And then I would just sort of link out to anything relevant. So rather than attachments, just, you know, if there's a news story that they need to read that's associated with your idea, link to that. So all in all, I'd be keeping it to about 2 paragraphs, maybe even 1.
Okay, so short and sharp.
Yeah.
Is it okay to cold pitch somebody?
Oh, of course, yeah. And actually, another thing you should do is point out why it's timely if it is. But yeah, cold calling, of course, how are you going to get work otherwise? You could, if you know somebody who's written for them or freelance for them, perhaps you could get them to vouch for you. But having been an editor for 8 years, that doesn't particularly make me think, brilliant, this is going to be great. You know, it just makes me think, well, you're mates. So yeah, cold calling's fine. And you could do things like have a stalk of them on Twitter, see what kind of articles they're sharing at the moment, see what conversations they're having, that kind of thing.
Excellent. Now, what about rejection? Are we going to expect a lot of it? How do we cope with it? Tell me about the heartbreaking, crushing, soul-destroying feeling of being rejected.
It doesn't really have an effect anymore. It just goes bing. And that's something you learn, obviously. If I'm pitching an idea to somebody, I've already got my backup plan B, C, D, and E. And I think that's the way to think about it. You know, you've almost got to anticipate that it's going to be rejected, which is a bit soul-destroying. You're right. Like when you put in sometimes half a day to get in the pitch right, because if you get it wrong, you don't really have another chance with that person. But then, you know, once you've written it, then it's pretty much ready to go and just be tweaked for the next bunch of people. So, yeah, my advice is just have the backup plans.
Yeah, as working in TV, I would expect 99 out of my 100 ideas to be rejected.
Yeah.
And it can be a bit sad, but I have turned failed TV ideas into articles for magazines, and I'm currently turning one failed TV idea into a podcast series. So, you know, the idea, if it's good, will get a home somewhere.
Yeah, it's almost worse if they say, yes, but, and then they reshape it into something really crap. Like, it would be much better if you did, and then you're like, and then you've got the choice of, do I go with that, or do I quietly sort of speak to a few other people? I would do the latter. Because it's heartbreaking when you see something that you know is going to be amazing and it's just sort of made bland.
Now, what if I've trolled my family and friends and I haven't got any stories to tell? Are there online communities to find work? Is that a thing? Talk to me about where freelancers find work if they don't want to pitch.
Well, I don't think you can, really. I mean, pitching's the job. Pitching's a massive part of a job. I mean, you could get online communities where people are saying, X is looking for stories, but I don't think, it's not that often you're going to get someone specifically saying, right, I want someone to write this story. But there are groups on Facebook, for instance, like, say, Young Australian Writers, Australian freelance writers, and then you've got the binders groups, which are aimed at female freelancers and writers and creatives in particular. They're all on Facebook. You can search for those. And sometimes you'll get an editor posting things like, I'm really looking for health stories right now, or something like that. But really, I mean, a good part of your job is to be having these ideas, and that's what people are after you for as a freelancer. That's the point, really. Hang on, I want to recommend one resource. It's a freelancer called Lindy Alexander, and she writes a blog called The Freelancer's Year, and it is the most fantastic free resource. I don't know how she upholds it and is also a freelancer, but she interviews freelancers, she interviews editors. What are you after? Here's how to get into travel writing. And if you follow her on Twitter as well, she often posts jobs that are going. So yeah, Lindy Alexander.
Fantastic. Is she Australian, British, American?
Australian. Yeah, she actually lives in my little country town.
Oh, fantastic. I love an Australian resource. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And if everyone who's watching this who works in the screen industry should know about I Need Crew on Facebook, Screen Hub, Grapevine. It's always worth checking out Seek, particularly if you've got the skills to be a videographer. There's often roles for videographers up there, both part-time, full-time contract. But as Jenny said, freelancing is an awful lot about coming up with ideas and pitching, or thinking about all your contacts and staying in touch so that you get regular work. Now, what if I have got some creative content to sell? If I'm a comedian or an artist or a singer or an actor, what ways are there for people to sell their content?
One that journalists use a lot, but anyone could use, and I keep meaning to do it myself, is Patreon. So of course, Patreon is where it's basically a subscription where fans, if you like, can pay for you to email them regular content. So it's usually in the form of a newsletter, or it could be video. And often you can have different tiers of prices as well. So if you pay X amount, you'll just get the basic newsletter. Pay this amount, you'll also get a personalized something or more exclusive material. I think that's absolutely brilliant. It tends to work best for people who have a niche. So for instance, Andrew P. Street, he's a journalist who often writes about politics and science. And you've got Andrew Stafford, he writes about music. So it's really a good thing for people who are very interested in your niche topic, but perhaps an editor doesn't want to constantly be publishing on that topic. Other than that, I recently wrote a story for The Guardian about how the arts sector is responding to COVID-19 and how they are managing to get their material out there because they've had all their events cancelled. So some people are creating bespoke content, such as doing things like, there's a musician called Bats, and she's recording cover versions for people at their request. And it's a pretty basic setup. Like, you email her, transfer the money, and then she'll send you a file of your finished song. Like, you don't have to use a fancy platform. But having said that, the Emerging Writers Festival has put out a resource, a document, which tells you how to go digital, and it tells you how to use things like Zencaster and StreamYard and all these other platforms I've never heard of. So at the moment, there are definitely people doing how-tos and showing you how to get your work out there. You might not be able to monetize it, you might be able to, or it might just be a question of building your brand to sort of, when all this kind of unsettled time is over, it's got you a better base to work from. Yeah,
excellent. Now, what if you don't make original content? What if you have got a skill to sell? Because I know that you add that to that's another of your income streams, is that you train and mentor people. So how does kind of selling your knowledge and your industry knowledge work? Tell me a bit about that, please.
Personally, all I've done is I have a website, valentish.net, where I basically have a range of services, including things like a Skype mentoring service. And so again, it's using pretty basic equipment, basic software. But I think a lot of people now are using this opportunity you've got a captive audience of people who are staying at home. They want to use this time productively. So a lot of people want to learn, want to do workshops and things. So you've got a lot of people who are hastily putting together some really quite cool workshops. Catherine Devenny is a writer who's put one together, like a 10 session course. She put it together in one day as a video course. And she's done it via a sort of pay what you feel donation button. So I think even I've seen people using Instagram to do little how-to videos. There are all sorts of ways to just get your skill set out there, either for free or monetize it. And there's also things like on Facebook, there's Arts Tasker, and that was set up by a theatre producer called Layla Enright. And that's like a networking site for artists of all different kind of mediums who want to develop their work with each other's help. Like, here's a script, can you help me work on it? Or what can I do for you? So that's a really nice thing to do as well.
And I think this is also worth mentioning that particularly in tough times, freelancers from all walks of life do need to gain new skills to capitalise on new markets. So it's our responsibility as freelancers to look at the market, look at new opportunities. For instance, probably 3 or 4 years ago, suddenly podcasts started to become a real thing. And, you know, it was a real opportunity for people who'd never worked in radio or audio production to go out, learn how to podcast and start making content. And that's the same. Like, you are never, ever too old to pick up a new skill or retrain. Jenny, have you learned any new skills recently for work?
That sounds like you know that I have, but you don't. But actually, a couple of years ago, I did this very long-winded course it was an online course about how to make an online course, which actually would come in really handy right now, but I've forgotten it, so I'm going to have to go back and do it again. But I guess in order for it to be priced as high as it was just broken down into gazillions of videos and homework and downloads and stuff. So it was a bit overwhelming. Probably could have been done in about half an hour. But, you know, that was originally, I thought, I've got this niche area now, addiction, and I was going to do an online course to sort of help people tackle theirs. And in the end, I didn't, because I felt a bit uncomfortable in that role of guru. So I decided not to. But now I'm sort of thinking of revisiting it, but in terms of helping people with their writing, that kind of thing. So there are lots of courses helping you do courses, produce courses. So just a quick Google will help you come up with things like that. And it has things like how to create a likable lady persona, and how to do your Facebook ads, like a video, and it basically becomes a sales funnel. So yeah, there's all sorts of things out there, and they should be easy to find.
Fantastic. Now, it's worth mentioning that in tough times, some of us need to go and actually get proper jobs. If you need to go and get a proper job, you will probably need to rewrite your CV. And you need to make your CVs relevant to the specific role. At one point a few years ago, I had 3 very distinct CVs depending on which role I was going for. It's also worth mentioning, particularly for TV people, that the way you write a CV for TV jobs is really, really bad for getting jobs with companies and corporates, because TV CVs are program. And what companies look at is like, oh my God, this person has worked in 17 different jobs in the last year. They are completely unstable. You will need to rewrite it. Group everything together under the role that you have done. Don't make make the advert or the program name big, make the company name small. It's a little sleight of hand that will give HR managers that comfort that you are not a crazy who's going to leave a job after 30 seconds. Also, check your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook profile, your Instagram, your Twitter. Just make sure they're all nice and clean and appropriate for the job. Now, finally, freelancing. Let's talk about actually one of the biggest things, which is the emotional side. How do you keep going? How do you find that resilience to keep going?
The longer I've done it, I've come to notice patterns. So I'm generally okay, because I'm the sort of person who is fine spending lots of time at home, and as I say, has learned to weather rejection. So the word rejection doesn't even seem to apply now. It's just business as usual. So what I've noticed in particular, though, is the period from about November to February, disaster for freelancers, because the editor or whoever you're pitching to and the payroll department disappear. And it's a really bleak time. You know, you've just spent a lot of money before Christmas, and then you've got this kind of black hole after Christmas where you're not really getting any work yet. Payroll always seems to come back to their desks in late Feb, or so it seems. And the wheels start cranking up very slowly, and you're just not looked after in the same way that their staff would be at all. And so from now on, you know, I've learned to prepare for that, see it coming in the months in advance, and make sure I'm financially set up for it, because, you know, stress brings anger, brings emotion, brings depression. So I would definitely kind of try and chart where in a year things are likely to be bad for you, and they'll be bad for everyone else as well. So it's good to get online and talk to people about it.
Great. So in summary, the principle of freelance life is versatility, adaptability, and resilience. Okay? Embrace the opportunities. They really are there if you look for them, and looking for them is what will make you lucky. If you sit at home and do nothing apart from think about the ideas that you could pitch, you are never ever going to get any work. If you sit at home and send out a reasonable number of pitches that are well designed and well thought through, targeted for the people that you're going for, you will get work. You will get loads of rejection. It is okay. It is just somebody saying no. So what to do now? What is a single thing, if you've got an idea, what is a single thing that you can do right now to take some action today? Write it down now. Go. Right now. Quickly. That's it. Thank you. Now, Jenny, how can people reach you?
It's just www.valentish.net. That's it. Easy.
Brilliant. Or they could stalk you on Twitter, of course.
They could, yeah. They'll just see things about hamsters and stuff, though. So I'm not terribly professional in my Twitter life.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, there'll be more coming from the back bedroom. You can join the conversation. #RunningFreeSkills. Keep up to date with Media Mentors at mediamentors.com.au. And finally, thank you so much to ACMI, our partners who have made all this possible. Thanks, Jenny. Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, sorry for plugging my website earlier.
No, are you kidding?
Sorry, not sorry.
No, exactly. You're not sorry at all, so don't even say it. All right, well, I've got to go because I've got to let the next person do that.
9 a.m. next one.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Good. Did a great job.
Thank you. Lots of love.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye. Oh God, how do I get out?